Hello and welcome to the Chamber Talk Show. I am Dr. Tamika Manning, and today I actually have a guest with me who's also a therapist, a licensed practical therapist, and she is a good friend of mine. Welcome, Mamie. She's sitting in for some of the other doctors. All right, welcome to the
Hello.
show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Good. Thank you so much. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get right into the show. We have an amazing guest today. Her name is Adrienne
Yes.
Heights. She is on a flight. She is on an amazing journey. Her story is one of resilience. She went through some major trauma. I am so proud to actually know her. I actually purchased her book a couple months ago. It's amazing. And she's going to talk to us about what happened to her. She was actually sexually assaulted by a notorious serial killer back in 1999. So she's going to be with us in just a moment. But before we even pull Adrienne into the show, Mamie, talk to me a little bit about um, what you did after experiencing some type of trauma, maybe either in childhood or in your young adulthood.
Sure, Dr. Manning. So for me, it was around what I can remember was around the age of 8 or 9. It involved a sibling. And at the time, I really didn't know what to make of it because, at that age, your brain is still developing. So 8 or 9, I think it was one of those things where for me, I believe in the beginning stages, God actually took those experiences, that trauma, and repressed it for me and kind of hid me, underneath his wings in it. And then fast forward when I was like 13 or 14, of course, is what happens when you bury trauma is that it began to flash back piece by piece. And I was like, oh my gosh. So then I had to come to this place now where I'm actually older, 14, 15, having to cope. What do I do? And so for me at that point, coping, what that looked like for me, for Mamie, was confronting the persons who actually violated me. And when I was actually able to do that, Dr. Manning, literally, it was a release and a lifting that, you know what? And all I said to the persons was, I know what you did, and I need for you to know that I know what you did, and it's not okay. And at that point, I was able to actually move away from it in the sense that it didn't no longer, nor does it now, control my life in any way as it relates to my emotions and how I deal with things that come up now.
Awesome. I remember the most traumatic thing was the loss of my grandmother. It wasn't a violation of any sort. And I remember having a lot of moments of just despair.
Hmm.
And I think staying busy, being active, hanging out with friends. I was in college. Those are some things that helped move me past that because I really dwelt on um, that loss because that was my
Right.
first major loss. And so, we say to people all the time, which is one of the premises behind the show, is engaging in healthy activities. So
For sure.
I like that. I like that you shared that story. So,
Thank you for yours.
so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and we have Adrienne. She is backstage, and we're going to bring her to the forefront so she can tell her story. Welcome to the Chamber Talk Show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for taking time out to be with us. We know it's Sunday. We know Sunday is typically family day, but we want to hear about your journey. Tell us what happened to you. Take us back to that moment in 1999.
Well, in 1999, I was a young woman. I think at a very good place in my life, working, and I was met with uh, a rape from bathtub murderer. And when it first came about, I just saw it on the news, so it was just like, oh, I seen this guy is going through and he's raping different women or whatever, and I had this premonition that I was going to be next, and it started a journey for me.
Wow. So from there, let's move forward.
Okay.
You woke up or something happened and he
Hmm.
was in your apartment.
Yes. So on that night. I had been talking to my mom and my sister on three-way, like we always did. We had a pretty close relationship, and this particular night, up to this point, I had been telling them that I felt like someone was following me. I had made up my mind that day that I was going to no longer live in fear. I had written myself a letter. I was like, today is going to be the first day of the rest of my life. I'm going to sleep tonight. I'm going to be a big girl. I'm going to listen to my jazz, turn all the lights off, and I'm going to be at peace. I had just like made a I call it a determination in my mind that I was going to do things differently. On that night, I heard a popping sound. Well, when I heard the sound, I called my mom and my sister, and I'm like, listen, I heard a sound. I'm scared. My sister had been spending the night over there at my apartment, her and her boys, because I had been telling them that someone had been following me and I was uncomfortable. So that night, since I decided I was going to be a big girl, I was like, no, don't come over here tonight. I'm going to be okay. I'm probably just freaking out. I'm just being scary. So we stayed on the phone. We laughed for like a long time. So I finally went to sleep. My next conscious thought, I heard somebody coming in my room. I heard this swishing sound, swish, 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 swish. And it was like, now I know it was like the sound of like windbreaker pants as he was walking in my room. And I slowly began to turn over while praying, Lord, don't let anybody be in here. And as I turned over, he takes off running and jumps up on my bed, puts the gun in my back, asked me, did I feel the gun? Told me, don't scream. And I was screaming, of course. He told me, don't scream. And he wasn't going to hurt me if I didn't scream. But my nightmare began. From that moment, he was in my apartment for I think it was like 2 to 3 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. And just like talking, he like said a lot of things that I think I'll never forget. He said I was different from the others. He said he asked me my name. I told him I wouldn't tell him my name, and he was like, "How about I call you Adrian?" Like just so cavalier. Like how about I call you Adrian? Like we've been friends our whole lives. I asked him, why would he do something like that? Why wouldn't he just come and knock on the door and you know just introduce himself? All of that stuff. He was like, I don't know. Like it was just so much like conversation throughout the night that I would never forget. Um, Even me like praying to God while he was there, asking God to just forgive me about my sins. Because if I had to die, I wanted to go to heaven. And I asked him, uh, he said he was gonna let me live, and I asked him. He said do something like there's no tomorrow, and I said, is there tomorrow? And he said, of course there is. And I said, but is there for me? And he just stopped, like he was thinking about it, and he was like, yeah. And so I said, you promise? And he said, I promise. And then as the night progressed, I just like, how you're just like trying to talk your way through to get, I guess to make him feel like I'm a person. I'm, this is someone and he knew that no one was coming over there. He knew so much about me. I knew nothing about him. And even while he was there, it didn't even register in my mind that all of this time I'd been living in fear from the bathtub murder. It never even clicked that this was him, because
Wow.
from the beginning, when I first saw it, I knew I was going to be next, and I moved. Well, when I moved completely on the other side of town, and that's where, he found me at.
Wow.
Wow.
So you had so many moments of despair after that. I'm going to go real quick to Ms. Williams. Can you talk to me about maybe similar situations, people that you have counseled in your practice, things that you could say? I mean, it just sounds so scary and so devastating.
It is, Dr. Manning and Adrian, when we talk, I mean, just hearing your story and listening to the harrowing things that go on to us who, of course, who didn't experience that, the first thing that comes to mind is how in the world do you have a conversation with somebody who you know is going to harm you? But again, in those moments, it's about, our brain just go into this fight, flight, or freeze. And you were there in the thick of it. And so in counseling various people who have experienced trauma, maybe not to the degree of yours, but it's similar in that, well, what do you do? And if we ourselves are not the person who's actually experienced, I think it becomes difficult for us to be empathetic or to be able to understand what it is or why it is that you made some of the choices that you did. And I applaud you here because this is not the norm to have a conversation with someone who is, his mindset is to harm you. And so to be able to talk yourself through that, as you said, created for you life.
Yeah.
And so go right ahead.
I believe so too, because I know at one point I was thinking as I was talking, like he was getting ready to leave, and I said, I won't call the police or whatever. And then he just like paused and came back and pushed my head back. And I remember thinking, oh my God, my mom said my mouth would get me in trouble one day. It's like, I'm trying to talk to assure him, and then I'm like, why are you talking all at the same time? I really believe that in God is what saved my life.
Oh,
Wow.
for sure. For
So
sure.
let's move forward. So you were assaulted, so you were raped by him. Let's talk about how many of the other women did not live. Like they were killed, and he was dubbed what, the bathtub serial killer? Was that the name they gave him?
The bathtub murderer. Yeah.
Wow.
So some of the other ladies were murdered. I had an opportunity to meet one of the ladies' mom, Wendy Prescott. It was her aunt that raised her. Her mom had been, I believe, murdered like when she was a little girl, and I was at a doctor's appointment. Typing on my Rip the Bandage page. I have the Rip the Bandage page where I do encouragement and stuff like that for other survivors. And my fingers were moving fast, and there was this lady sitting next to me, and she said, "Oh my goodness, young lady, you sure are typing fast. What are you typing?" And so I began to say, I was one of the survivors of the bathtub murders, and I have this page that I try to encourage people on that go through a lot of the things that I've experienced. And she said that was her niece that she raised, and all the years that I kind of like suffered in silence in trying to understand how God let me live, and they died. She told me, "I'm so glad you lived. I'm so glad you lived. That now you can do what it is you're doing." So it was like an assurance. But other ladies did lose their lives, and it was something that I really, really struggled with, because I knew that there was nothing good in myself, that I could have done. But of course, now in retrospect, I'm very happy and thankful, to God that I'm here. But yeah, other ladies did lose their lives, and I pray for their families on a regular.
Wow. So in
Wow.
your book, Broken Keys, and Rain and I have both read the book, you talk about learning how to move past the trauma. And one thing that you said clearly was forgiving those that have harmed you and breaking free from fear. Speak to that real quick, and then Williams, I'm going to let you speak to that as well.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so for me, forgiveness was a major key in my healing, because if you don't forgive, I believe that you carry a weight. You carry a weight on you, kind of like it's not holding the other person hostage, even though to yourself, you tell yourself you're just angry with them and you can't move past it. But the only person that's really a hostage when you don't forgive is yourself. And so the other person has gone on with their lives, and you're still suffering in silence or angry or whatever it is. In this particular instance with the bathtub murderer who was executed, um, I I had to come to a place to forgive even him, because if I did not, I could not move forward. And if he ends up have had asked for forgiveness and ends up in heaven, and I not make it because I can't release him, then I feel like the journey and my life would be in vain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Profound. Just an amazing story of resilience. I did find a funny in the book. You talked about watching Friday, and you knowing all the words, like all of the script, like speak to us about that, because I found therapy in that as well. And I like comedy and I
Mhm.
like to laugh. I'm not a really big fan of Friday, but I do watch comedy to help me get through certain situations.
Well, Friday really helped me, and even to this day, like I don't know how, but when I got raped, um, my parents, all my friends came and moved me out of that apartment. I moved in with my parents. I slept in the bed with my mom, 22-year-old woman, sleeping in the bed with my mom. And the only thing that really helped me step away from my reality was that movie Friday, because it was like it had absolutely no trauma in it as far as rape or pain for me, you know? So I could really just sit there and just step away from my reality and just, and to this day, I still like, if there's something crazy going on, I'll go and find something funny to just reset my mind. Like, okay, we're not going to think about that. Let's move over into something else and let that go.
I love it. I love it. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us. And I know now you go out, you do evangelism. You have used something that was meant to harm you into, for total good. So that was the reason why I wanted to have you on as well, so that you could talk about that, so other people could see how no matter what happens, you can overcome trauma. Maybe you want to speak to that.
I just, again, Dr. Manning, like you, I just think it's, we as people all need something that we can actually use to help us cope and to get through. And many people do use comedy or just laughter in itself as a defense mechanism to be able to cope with what's going on with them. And I think that that's what Adrian did in being able to just continuously watch and know every line to Friday. Now,
Mhm.
I too was not necessarily a big Friday fan, but I have children who, and my
Okay.
youngest daughter, you two could probably sit down and just go ahead and let us all see the show again between watching you two. But something else that you mentioned about the whole idea of forgiveness has unforgiveness has been said this way. It's like you drinking poison and yet you're waiting for the other person to drop dead. Well, without forgiveness, you're the only person who will be dying here. And I think one of the other things that we as people don't necessarily have a really good understanding of is this: forgiveness is not a feeling, it's not an emotion. Forgiveness is a decision, and you have to choose it. And it's about forgiveness is it's when you release a person from a debt or an obligation, or in this case, a wrong that has been occurred against you. And when you do that, you're actually able to live. And I think Adrian mentioned there when she said, well, what if I didn't forgive this person and he went to heaven and then I didn't because of that? And that is literally what keeps us when we don't forgive. It's like having dogs in a cage for so long that even when you open it, they don't know that they're free
Mhm.
because they've been caged for so long. And the moment of forgiveness releases you from, or releases that other person from the debt that they no longer owe you. And you're saying, you know what? I'm free. And that sounds like exactly what Adrian did. She was actually able to move on, live on.
I love it. I love that. And I love that analogy that you used. So, as we actually draw to a close, ultimately, this serial killer is caught. What ultimately happens to him?
He is executed on my birthday.
Well,
Executed on my birthday. And at the time, I've said this before, and it's my true, honest to God feelings. I don't necessarily believe in um, execution, although when it happened, I know that you have to accept what the Lord allows. And when it happened, um, I was like, wow. It was almost as if God was saying, now you can live. Like on your birth date, the day that I gave you life, I
wow.
allowed him to die. Now you can live. Like you can release that and you can live. So it was time to live. It was time to start new. Not saying that it did not happen to you, but you have to let it go. Now it's time for you to live, because you miss. I think I missed so much of life, and even I believe that I even raised my daughter in a lot of the fears that I had. But God was saying, okay, it's time to release that. It's time to move forward. You can no longer walk in the fear. You cannot no longer walk in the trauma. You can no longer walk in the pain, because you cannot live effectively if you're living through your trauma, if you're living through your pain. So you have to, at some point, release what's hurting you in order to heal.
Absolutely. And I'll
Awesome.
let you, before you go, address a quick question. One of the viewers said, do you have any residual nightmares or things that resurface at times as a result of what happened?
I do know that I have triggers. Of course, we all do, but I have certain triggers. I have to feel safe. I have to be able to, like, I don't necessarily like darkness, although I've learned since then how to cope and how to deal with my triggers. I no longer have nightmares anymore at all. I can't even tell you the last time I had a nightmare. I believe that when my healing process began, there was a freedom that came over me, and a lot of the things that I carried for so many years, I no longer carry, and nightmares is one of them. If I think on it, if I think on anything, even outside of the rape, I think on it, denounce it, release it, and move forward. So it's
I
not
love it.
that lives in my conscious, so I don't dream about it.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thinks on it, denounces it, and releases it. Powerful, very powerful. Thank you
Yes.
so much for joining us. Again, the book is Broken Keys. It's in the background. It's a great read. Like Mamie said last night, it's an easy read as well. Thank you so much, Ms. Heights, for joining us today.
Thank you
Thank
for having
you. Awesome. Awesome.
Very, a very awesome interview. What would you say, counselor? What would you say? I mean, I think this really is profound.
I mean, other than awesome, I mean, she is an awesome lady to be, first of all, to go through the experience and here to tell us about it. So something that came to mind when she was saying that, Dr. Manning, is this, is that how God actually never leaves himself without a witness. Never leaves himself without a witness when we go through whatever it is that we've gone through. And Adrian Heights is our witness today that, you know what, that with all of that has gone on in her life, she's saying to us, you too, it doesn't matter what you're going through, but you know what, God is not going to leave himself without a witness. You are alive so that you can actually tell the story. And I think it was just well, one of the things that resonated with me too while she was talking was when she talked about at the end there when she was talking about, you know, letting things go and denouncing, and she talked about some of the things that she actually experienced, like, you know, the nightmares that she used to have, and just, you know, having to live in the dark and learning to cope. I began to think about her book, the title, Broken Keys. And I said to myself, here's the question posed to our audience: can broken keys be fixed? Well, yeah. And you know what? I saw it with Adrian, because broken keys, step one, here's how you repair broken keys. The first thing you would need to do is you remove all the pieces from the piano so you can actually get to that one key that needs to be fixed. And then you make sure you know where that piece came from on that key so that you can put it back so that you can do just what Adrian did and is doing now: live abundantly.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I know it was a
Awesome.
great interview. She's a life coach now, ordained evangelist. She's an author, a mother, and a wife. So she overcame. She's absolutely amazing, resilient. She's the founder and president of Rip the Bandage, which is a nonprofit organization that serves the homeless and low income families in the area. So it was an amazing interview. Thank
Great.
you so much for joining me today and being a guest host while the other doctors are out today. And
Thank you for having me.
we'll see you soon. Okay. Thank you
Thank
guys for joining the Chamber Talk Show. And we will see you guys back here at the end of the month for another edition of the Chamber Talk Show. Have a great one.
Take care.